Good, happy Monday evening, June 1st, 2020. I'm Riley King, and welcome to this Monday evening edition of the RK Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network, where we have your national news, international news, business news, and political news. Let's begin this evening edition of the RK Newscast right now. First up, we begin with breaking news. We have breaking news into our newsroom right now. Independent autopsy of George Floyd finds death due to asphyxia, labels it homicide. Independent autopsy finds George Floyd died of asphyxia. Former NYC medical examiner is conducting examination. An independent autopsy ordered by the George Floyd's family found his death was a homicide caused by asphyxia due to neck and back compressions that led to a lack of blood flow to the brain, according to early findings from the examination released today. Floyd was apprehended by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota last Monday, and one of the officers pinned his knee to Floyd's neck as he called out that he couldn't breathe. Now let's take a look at live updates of George Floyd protests spreads nationwide. Let's take a look at those live updates right now. What you need to know. Protests erupted for the sixth day across the U.S. over the death of George Floyd, an unarmed black man, at the hands of a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. At least 40 cities imposed curfews, and National Guard members have been activated in at least 23 states and Washington, D.C. An independent autopsy found Floyd died from asphyxia from sustained pressure, while the Hennepin County medical examiner found no physical findings to support a diagnosis of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation. One former officer who was seen with his knee on Floyd's neck was charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter, but prosecutors say the charge isn't harsh enough and are demanding charges for the other officers involved. And here are the latest information as well. Floyd family attorney calls for an end to destruction. Take a breathe for George. New York Attorney General promised swift investigation to NYPD protest conduct. McCauley calls for handling after Floyd's death. Senate Majority Mitch McConnell delivered a strong speech on the Senate floor Monday, saying Americans are in an hour of great pain and unrest in the country over the recent killings of 3 African American citizens. New York City curfew will take effect at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Attorney, other 3 officers need to be charged criminally in Floyd's death. George Floyd's funeral will be held in Houston on June 9th, attorney says. And that is the latest updates on the George Floyd information and on the protest that is spreading nationwide. What started as peaceful protests turned violent with reports of vandalism and looting. Let's take a listen to this video from ABC News.
As we mentioned, a wave of protests swept across this country in response to the death of George Floyd. In Oakland, as in many cities, what started as peaceful protests turned violent with reports of vandalism and looting. Here to discuss this is Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf. And Mayor Schaaf, last night we know that shots were fired at the police administration building. And unlike other cities in the Bay Area, you have not imposed a curfew. Why?
We have not imposed a curfew at this time because we want to focus our law enforcement resources on people who are committing criminal acts. But if we do impose a curfew, it's with the knowledge that historically curfews have been used as tools of government oppression and racial bias.
Obviously, we are in really tough times, even before this, with this pandemic, business owners struggling. What would you like to say to those business owners in Oakland who are now also concerned about their property and their safety right now?
Yeah, we are in a lot of pain in this city. To wake up and see, our beloved community trashed with hateful messages graffitied everywhere and incredible damage to not just, big corporate stores, but little mom and pops, many businesses owned by people of color. And that is what has been so painful. Oakland was one of the very first parts of this whole country to go into a shelter in place. We've been taking the coronavirus pandemic very seriously. And so these small business folks are just hanging on by a thread already. And they are so sympathetic. This is Oakland. We are the birthplace of social movement.
Certainly. And we've heard actually from the Atlanta mayor earlier today about this next question. How concerned are you about the potential spread of the coronavirus in your city now as a result of all of these people gathering in close contact during these protests?
I am terrified because let's be clear, this virus spreads so easily. I will commend other kind of activists organized a car caravan to demonstrate yesterday, 2,000 cars. Now that was socially distant and also expressing appropriately during the daytime, raising up the issue that is really in people's hearts right now, but people cannot afford to get sick. And many of the impacts last night were in the very neighborhoods that have been disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus. And that has been just what has really been painful as a mayor that is so committed to the safety and well-being of my community.
Well, we certainly want to thank you, Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, for taking the time to speak with us today during these times.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Kremlin. Trump tells Putin about idea for summit with Russia. The Kremlin says that U.S. President Donald Trump has called Russian President Vladimir Putin to tell him about his proposal to convene an international summit involving Russia. U.S. President Donald Trump called President Vladimir Putin Monday to tell him about his proposal to convene an international summit that would involve Russia, the Kremlin said. Trump said Saturday he will postpone until the fall a meeting of the G7 leading industrialized nations that he had planned to hold next month, and plans to invite Russia, Australia, South Korea, and India. Trump told reporters that he feels the current makeup of the group is very outdated and doesn't properly represent what's going on in the world. Closing prices for crude oil, gold, and others commodities. Closing prices for crude oil, gold, and other commodities and foreign exchange levels. Benchmark U.S. crude oil for July delivery fell 5 cents to settle a 35.44 a barrel Monday. Brent crude oil for August delivery rose 48 cents to 38.32 a barrel. Wholesale gasoline for July delivery fell 1 cent to 1.7 a gallon. In July, heating oil fell 1 cent to 1.3 gallon. July natural oil gas fell 8 cents to 1.77 per 1,000 cubical feet. And now let's take a look at your U.S. stock market and see how your U.S. stock market closed for this Monday evening. And here's a look at that U.S. stock market for all of you for this Monday evening. Your Dow Jones Industrial Average closed in the green, went up. Your NASDAQ closed in the green, went up. S&P 500 closed in the green, went up. Gold closed in the red, went down. Oil closed in the green, went up. U.S. 10-year closed flat. Euro/USD closed in the green, went up. And VIX closed in the green, went up. Stocks rise to kick off June as investors continue to bet on the economy reopening. U.S. stocks rose on Monday to start off a new month aimed at increasing hope of a successful reopening of the economy. Those gains come after back-to-back monthly increases for stocks. First Lady Melania Trump calls for peaceful protests, doesn't mention underlying causes. She tweeted she was saddened to see the country damaged and vandalized. Without mention why people are protesting, First Lady Melania has added her voice to those condemning violent protests and calling for peace. The First Lady tweeted Monday morning that she was saddened to see our country and communities being damaged and vandalized, and asked everyone to protest in peace, while making no mention of any of the underlying reasons causing people to peacefully protest. And thank you for joining us for this evening edition of the RK Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another newscast. Good night and bye, everyone.